Yeah, just wait there, Andrew. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beecraft Hangout. This is our third one over the last 3 months. We're actually getting very consistent now. So thank you very much for joining us. We're hoping we had a few little technological difficulties, and Andrew, I think you're now backing in. I think so. Fingers crossed, we'll get there. But for those of you who are watching this in Google+, please, if you have any questions throughout our conversations, do just pop your question in the event page underneath. And if you are watching this on the Beecraft site, there's actually some question boxes, I think it's underneath or above the actual video. So please do just pop your questions in there. Alternatively, if you don't fancy doing that and you just want to pop us a question using Twitter, then just use the hashtag, which is BeecraftLive, and I will try and do my best to bring in as many questions as I can possibly bring in. You'll also notice, for some reason, there is a little lag between my audio and my video. It's very much planned. I don't know how I've done it, but there you go. I'm sorry about that. So, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to start off with the first question, which I'm just going to look at this because I'm going to forget what I did. It came in from Twitter, from Glyn Smith, who said he has a super with waxworm, and is it safe to extract? Any advice, please? So, Claire, I don't know if you want to take that off in terms of whether a super is safe to extract with waxworm.
Okay, I'll start off. People may not know the term waxworm, which is the old name, if you like, for wax moth. There's two sorts. There's greater wax moth and lesser wax moth. And greater wax moth tends to stay in the brood nest because it likes eating feces from brood and things like that. Whereas the one that gets into the supers is the lesser wax moth. So that doesn't do as much damage, although it does spin its webs. It burrows under the cappings and it spins its webs under there and defecates on the comb and things, which is why we've got the question, I guess. So I think the first thing is it depends how bad the infestation is. If it's a really bad infestation, the comb is absolutely covered, and you know there's webbing and there's muck and everything everywhere, then no, I wouldn't extract it for human consumption. But what I would do is to put it into the freezer, put it in a plastic bag, put it in the freezer, and that will kill the larvae and the eggs. And well, you won't. Well, if there's any adult moths, it will kill that as well. But I wouldn't expect them at this time of year. So basically, kill off all the living matter. And then I would use it later on when you needed to add, give some food to a colony or a nucleus or something like that. If it's not a very bad infestation, then I would say it was a question of actually just, taking out the badly infected bits and then extracting the rest. I don't know which part of the country the question has come from, but there's a good chance if you're anywhere near oilseed rape that comb will now be solid, in which case you will have to melt the honey out rather than extracting it. But maybe this is also looking forward to the next season and know what happens. If you have a strong colony, they will usually keep wax moth at bay. So it's usually the weaker colonies that get infested with wax moth. So try and keep your colonies strong. Does that help? I can't hear anything.
Right, James has actually turned his microphone off at the moment, so I will say that I found that very useful. So thanks very much for that, Claire, because that's something that I didn't know a great deal about. So very useful for me as well, having not come across wax moth, touch wood, in any of my hives.
I think you've done quite well then, because wax moths, certainly greater wax moths, is more prevalent in the southern counties, but it is presumably with global warming, changing climate, it is actually moving up the country. So it is seen further north than it used to be. But I think lesser wax moth probably has been seen fairly well up the country, but maybe not in Scotland, I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually, sorry, Mike, you were right, Wendy, you picked up on that. My microphone was turned off, which is typical. Glyn was actually based in King's Lynn, to answer your question.
Yeah, so he's about on the same level as me, but he's out on the on the coast, which may be a bit warmer. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not on the coast. Maybe it's colder.
Well, I'm down pretty much on the coast. And sorry, James, am I over talking you?
No, go for it.
No, I'm pretty much on the coast, and I use polystyrene hives. So whether that makes any difference, I don't know. I have seen wax moth in wooden hives down here, but
yeah,
as I say,
I think it's
fine.
Strong colonies. I mean, that's the answer for quite a lot of disease. Not all of them, obviously, but certainly for things like wax moth. Strong colonies will generally keep on top of them.
It's one of the worst things to see, because I had it a couple of years ago, and seeing your colony succumb to wax moth is not a pretty sight, and it's a very sad sight, I have to say. And as you said, Claire, colonies, mine was particularly weak, and it just succumbed, and it's not a nice thing to have to go through. But Glenn, I hope that answered your question. And just a reminder for everybody who's out there watching at the moment, this is a live show, so please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us the questions. On the Beecraft site, there's a little ask a question button, and I will be able to bring those questions in. So any questions you have, please pop them in. You mentioned, Wendy, the polystyrene hives just then.
Yes.
And we had a question in from Ian Judge, who has put here, I'm thinking about buying a couple of polystyrene hives, mainly due to the cost factor. I already have nationals and WBCs, but does anyone here use them? And if so, what are the pros and cons? Andrew, can I start with you on that? Because I know you we've been discussing this already. And
yeah, well, polystyrene hides, in fact, have been available for about 20 years, been used quite extensively in Scandinavia and Canada. And of course, they have colder winters there, but they haven't been so widely used in this country more recently, because of course they were developed, or they were made for the Langstroth hives. And of course in the UK we don't use a lot of Langstroths, we've got our own ones, but they are now available for national hives. The polystyrene itself is a lot denser than the packaging the type of packaging you may have for a television, for example. It's a lot denser and has a much smoother finish. I suppose the main benefits are better insulation, it's completely waterproof, it's cheaper than cedar often, easy to clean. Well, that's a bit controversial, but generally it's easier to clean. Of course, it's lighter than wood, and providing you've got the proper dimensions, it should be compatible with the wooden national hive. It is slow to biodegrade, although of course it depends on how good you are with your hive tool when you come to open up your hive, and whether you damage the corners or not. What there is to clean the hives, Varela have a leaflet on cleaning and sterilization of hives that they published in May 2013. And there also is an article in Beecraft that was published, I think it was in 2011, on polystyrene hives. The main way of cleaning it is or sterilize it, is to soak and scrub it with washing soda to remove wax and propolis, and then sterilize it with something like household bleach, which isn't absorbed into the material. Recycling, well, that's a bit difficult. There isn't really much done on separate recycling at recycling centres these days, well, not so far anyway. What else can I tell you about a polystyrene hive?
I'll tell you what, Andrew, while you're thinking then, why don't I put the question over to Wendy, because Wendy, you use them exclusively, as I understand. So
yes,
what would you say to Ian were your pros and cons of using the poly hives?
Well, and Andrew's quite right about the insulation. That's an excellent side to them. They have all had open mesh floor, and so you get a good circulation of air, and we've never had any problems with condensation at all during the winter months. And we do leave the open mesh open throughout the winter, and we only use trays to check for varroa. The point that Andrew made about opening of the hives, the ones we have plastic runners fore and aft. We've got Langstroth, by the way. We decided to go Langstroth, and so the plastic runners are there to protect the polystyrene from damage from the hive tool. So I really... Sorry, Claire?
Do you find you get any algae growth on the outside? Do you need to treat the outside for algae growth?
I have to say that we do, every spring we will change the floor, and yes, we do get some, depending where the hives are. One location that we've got them at, we do get a lot of green on the outside, but that's something that I would...
do you paint
I do. Sorry?
You paint the outside to prevent or to minimise the algae growth.
Yes, yes. I mean, all of the hives that we had arrive flat packed. So you put them all together, which is a very simple thing to do. Paint all the outsides, and we've got ours in sort of multicolour, but you can do them whatever colour you like to actually disappear them, if you like, in the countryside, because you don't want them necessarily spotted by people. So yes, but what I do quite regularly is if a hive box becomes particularly dirty, then I'll actually transfer the frames into a clean box, take the box away and give it a scrub.
Right, okay. James, you got some photographs of mine about some woodpecker damage on polystyrene hives. Do you have them available at all? That could be shown.
Yeah, let me get them up. And I have to say, while you're saying that, I mean, I use a poly as well, and I must say that insulation thing for me is a real bonus. I mean, the colonies I've had in that, and also I use a bee house as well as a national. Every time those two colonies in the bee house and the poly come out storming, and far earlier, in my experience, than in my national hives.
Okay.
Andrew, let me just. I'm going to bring up your photo.
You got those pictures?
Yeah.
I mean, you tend to put. Yeah, there we are.
There we go.
You've got to put chicken wire around them to prevent the woodpeckers. Have you got the other one there?
Bear with me.
James, I've lost my view of you, so I can't see the photographs that you're showing.
Okay, it should be there. Can everyone else see it? Yeah. Okay. Well,
That's
one of the hives, and the other one I will just share for you again. And the other one is this one. That's the other one you shared, Andrew.
Yeah, there we are.
That's quite a lot of damage, hey?
Yes.
That's
well, obviously, you put chicken wire around them.
I haven't actually seen that. I have to say that where we had one hive that was painted brown, we did suffer some woodpecker damage, but the others that we've got in different colours have been fine. But I guess that just depends on the location of them, really.
I think it depends on the woodpecker.
Well, yeah, how tasty the woodpeckers they are.
We had years and years and years where we had no problems with woodpeckers whatsoever, and then suddenly one of them found that a brown box that had fuzzies inside was a beehive, and we've had to put wire around ever since. And they've even managed to get through wire and peck holes in a pile of empty supers. Goodness knows what they thought they were going to get out of those, but there you are.
Oh, I've had that before now, yes.
Yeah, brainless birds, I think, is the description.
No.
All right. Well, there's some good photos on there, and interesting about the paint. I know if you search online, there's an awful lot of painted hives, which are all poly stuff as well. So, okay, I'm having some questions coming in, so thanks so much for doing that. Sharon, I've just seen your question come in, so thank you so much. I'll get to that in a second. But obviously, do keep in the Beecraft website. There's a little option there underneath the video. It says "Ask a question." Feel free. Doesn't any silly question? It won't be sillier than what I ask generally, so don't worry about that. Okay, so what else have we got? We've got a couple of sort of disease-based questions here. We've had one in from David Garner on the email saying, one of my hives has sign of nosema. How can this be treated in winter, and what would be causing it? Could it be the fact that I was using homemade fondant, which they have approximately half of it left? Is it a food or stores? Could that be a factor? Has anyone got any experience of that in terms of the nosema and treating it in the winter? What would you guys say?
I would say you can't, not till the spring. And then the chances are then you've got to give it the chance of either living or dying. It's, you can't disturb a colony at this time of year to give it treatment. The treatment, and there isn't any treatment anyway now, not a legal treatment. We used to be able to feed it, I can't remember what it was called now. Anyway, we can't anymore, so it doesn't. Sorry?
Fumidil B.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much. My brain is getting old. And you can't get that. It's not legal to use it anymore now. So the only way of treating for nosema is to move bees onto clean comb, and you can't do that until the spring. What we would do if we had colonies that were dwindling or not expanding, dwindling, or well, not the ones that died, but the others, we would actually unite them in the spring to get one big colony that's full of nosema, if you like, rather than lots of little ones, and then move that onto clean comb. But once they start flying in the spring, if the infection isn't too bad, then they will defecate outside the hive and move the spores outside. So, they can recover, but it'll be later on in the spring once they get going.
And just for perhaps some of the beginners amongst us, the signs of nosema, if they're not sure what to look for, is there any advice you can give for that?
There are no outward signs of nosema. Often it is associated with dysentery, but dysentery can happen without nosema. So just because you've got dysentery does not mean you've got nosema, but there's a fair chance that they might have. So the only way you can really check it is to take a sample of bees, grind them up and look at them under a microscope and see the spores. And for that, if you haven't got access to a microscope, then very often the local association will have a microscopist who will take a sample and will do it for you. If you haven't got anybody locally, the National Bee Unit will do it for you, but they will charge you quite a lot.
There you go. All right, so David, I hope that answers your question. David Garner, that was. Okay, Crikey, we got a whole load coming through. Where shall I go to next? Incidentally, just to say, Gabrielle from Toronto. Oh, crikey, there's a dog going somewhere. Gabrielle, got your question from Toronto. That's great. About the flow hive. We will come on to the flow hive in a minute because that's seemingly a very hot topic in the world of social media at the moment. Seems to be some great conversations going on about it. We had a question in from Ian Sherwood, a counsellor nonetheless, who said, I've been keeping bees for a few years now, and I have a national hive and an omelette bee house. Behoose. I enjoy trying a different hive, and I'm considering a warre or a sun hive this year. Any thoughts on different hives? When do you use polyhives? I use a mixture of poly, bee house, and national. I've also got Langstroth, but I haven't switched to that. Do any of you guys use the warre or the sun hive at all, or have experience of it? A load of shaking heads. All right, well, I'll tell you what. What's the opinion? What are the practicalities? Because I must say, let me just put my experience on this. I was very keen, like Ian was, to try out a variety of hives. And one person at my association said to me, James, don't be so stupid. Stick with the size and stick with it. I.e. 14 by 12, a national. Don't necessarily switch to having one of everything, because it means that all your equipment isn't necessarily interchangeable, and suddenly you'll be in a flat panic when everybody around you doesn't have a Langstroth hive. And so my advice would definitely be fully encourage, because it's nice to have different hives, but just be prepared for the fact that you're not going to have many people around you with perhaps these different hives that you might be using. I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts on that at all.
I think as you're suggesting, James, the important thing is to have just one type of hive in your apiaries, and you can't mix them, because you invariably want a bit of equipment for one hive that you haven't got any spare of. So I would always suggest just going for one type of hive. It doesn't really matter which one you choose, though it doesn't seem as though those ones that you've asked about you've got much experience about using. The national is the one that's the most common, and you can always get second-hand parts for them, certainly more than any other type.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll move on from that because, again, we're still getting all these questions coming through. But I will just say, Ian, we have got planned a specific hangout on natural beekeeping, and no doubt we'll be talking about the warrior, the sun, top bar hives, you name it, in that sense, because I think it's an important matter that people need to understand more about. So that's coming up in the next few months, so we'll keep you posted on that. But Ian, thanks for coming that question through. A quick one's just come in from Karen. I love your email address, Karen. I think it's fantastic. But it just said, and I think it's a quick one, if you feed fondant at this time of year, does it take less effort for the bees to use more than their honey stores? What are your thoughts on that? Anybody out there willing to take that?
My initial thought was that it's more because they need water to put it into solution before they can drink it. Whereas the honey stores should be, I mean, they may have granulated, obviously, but they should be in liquid form once they've taken the cappings off. But if you do feed fondant, you want to make sure it's right down on the top bars with an eat ground. Put some plastic over it to stop it drying out, probably some insulation over it, newspaper, old coat or whatever, and then just put an eat ground or a empty soup around and the inner cover and roof back, so that nothing else can get at it.
Lovely. I must say, it's what I use fondant at this time of year, I have to say, and then look at putting some pollen patties on just when the weather gets a little bit hotter and so on. And
we've actually used fondant for all our feeding this year. I mean, we haven't had to feed very much because we tend to leave a super of honey on. But anything that has needed feeding, we've used fondant. And it's actually very convenient to use. It's much less mess than making up sugar syrup, spilling it everywhere.
Yeah, I know the feeling. That's pretty much me. Okay, let's move on because I think this topic might take a little bit more time. Sorry, for those of you who, I'm just on a dual screen at the moment. We've had a couple of questions in about this new hive which has come out on social media. And what I'm just going to do is let me just screen share a website that would probably be worth me showing you. It's called the Flow. It's called the Flow Hive, and it's here. I'm just going to put this on the one so you can actually. I'm just staying on it. So it's this. Now, this is a bit of a supposedly a bonkers idea. It's when I first came up as a beekeeper, I made the complete and utter misjudgment that this is actually what you did as a beekeeper, and you stuck a tap on the side of your hive and you literally fill up a jar of honey. I was that sort of naive. But what has happened is 2 Australian beekeepers have come up with a patented idea of literally, and you'll see on here with my mouse, literally a honey tap. Now, the reason this is getting an awful lot of headlines at the moment is because if any of you are aware of what is called Kickstarter, Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform where people put out their ideas. It's the new way of building capital in order to fund your idea. They've put it out to Kickstarter, and it's going live on the 23rd of February. And to quote Gabrielle, I'm interested in what you guys think about the Flow Hive. Sorry if it was already discussed. It wasn't. Gabrielle, don't worry. I'm from Toronto, Canada. So, Gabrielle, thanks for putting your question in. Now, this seems to have prompted an outcry from all areas of the beekeeping and non-beekeeping society because it's a unique idea. And I suppose my question, and I'm going to put this out there as a question for those of you who are watching this as well. Could this be one of the most exciting hive developments in decades, or is it a hoax? Some people out there are calling it an April Fool. It's so absurd. I just want to put it out there for an honest opinion from yourselves. I mean, Claire, I'm going to start with you because I know you've got some feelings about it. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's not fair.
I thought I'd put you in the hot seat first because I know okay, let me just put it this very easy, which is one of the biggest criticisms that I've seen so far in the social media space is people are saying it's all well and good, but there's 2 main issues in here. Number 1 is what if you've got the all-seed rape honey? What if you've got the heather honey? It's just never going to come out. And secondly, there's an issue of cleanliness, which is how is anything going to get clean there? How is it going to be sterilised? How do you take it out? How do you put it back in? And there's big questions around it.
one of the things that's interesting is that, as they say, you don't have to filter it, and yet they're breaking up the cells to get the honey out. So I'm at a loss to know how they manage to clean the wax off the filters to keep it coming out without need of further filtering. The video is also very interesting because if I had jars of honey open like that around my hives when the bees were flying, they certainly wouldn't be. They would be being investigated, shall we say. In fact, you probably wouldn't be able to get near them.
Yeah, one of the things I will know, because I know that's also been a big comment in the social stream, which is having open pipes like that. And what I'm going to do is actually, while I'm talking, I'm actually going to bring up a photo so you can see it. A lot of people have criticised it by saying, "Hang on a minute, this is not right," because they've got open pipes, which obviously mean there's going to be a massive problem with robbing and wasps and all this sort of stuff. Let me just share this photo here so people can see another perspective on this. And actually, this one, I don't think you can necessarily see it, but you've got the pipe coming out, and that has actually got a lid on it, because there's what they are saying is obviously that's for purposes of photography, that it looks like it's just dripping out of the hive, and here they've actually put it within caps on the top of the jars. So maybe that answers that one question, but
I don't think it does. If you've taken a super off and you've got a cover over it, under it and over it, and you've just held it there, what do you get? You get bees investigating it.
It must be quite from the aroma around the hive if it's coming out like that. It would attract, as you're saying, Claire, that it would attract other bees to rob it.
Well, they'd certainly be interested in it. Well, at least my bees would. I mean, maybe Australian bees are different, but my bees would be all round that, saying, "Hey, hang on, we want to get at this."
Those are normal, I think. Mine would be doing the same, I think. I'm intrigued to know more about it. I'd love to open it up and have a look inside.
Just a question here that Gabrielle's put here: the cells are from plastic, capping is not ruptured, so there should be no wax in the honey. Maybe that's how they're trying to get around the filtering. But
wait a minute, let's not say that again.
Okay, I'll say that again. It says here, the cells are from plastic, capping is not ruptured, so there should be no wax in the honey. Thank you, Gabrielle, for pointing that out. I mean, I must point this out particularly clearly, which is, from what I've seen now, there is an awful lot of discussion. There's a very good explanation as to how it works. I haven't had the time to read it fully, so I must apologise for not looking intently. But I know one of the big criticisms from somebody on Facebook, a chap called Andy, was the fact that he prepares his honey for competitions, and what's this about non-filtering? It was his biggest question, or one of his big questions anyway. I don't know. It's an interesting one. Anybody else got an opinion on this at all? Peter, Wendy, Pauline, Rodri?
I've got one, I think, actually. My biggest thing with beekeeping, I'm passionate about it, and extracting honey is the biggest part of it. We all know what sort of mess it makes in the kitchen when we're extracting honey. So I can see the benefits of like a new technology like that, but surely it detracts from the experience of beekeeping, if that makes sense. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Wendy, you're muted, but I see you're uttering things.
Can I say something, James?
Yeah, go for it, Pauline. Yeah.
I saw the video, and they said in a couple of places on the video they said that you can extract this honey without disturbing the bees. Well, I beg to differ. If you're taking honey from bees, even if you're doing it secretly through the back door, you're disturbing the bees. And as Claire says, it'll make bees rob. So, no. And what's the point?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you know? Let me. In fact, Wendy, you go first. I know you were talking. So, Wendy, have you got an opinion on this? And I think, Wendy, you're still muted. I don't know. Let me just have a little look, see if it's a problem on this end. Let's have a little look. No, you're not muted here, Wendy. There might be a problem with your microphone, just so you know. But actually, just.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go for it, Claire.
If they like to send me one, I'll give it a try.
Well, it's a Kickstarter. It starts on the 23rd. We'll see what the price is. I have a feeling it's going to be quite expensive, but we just don't know. We'll see what happens.
I'm afraid they're not going to get a contribution from me.
Do you know if there's anyone selling them in this country?
No, Andrew. The thing is, they've patented an idea. Now they've got to fund it. They've got to fund the building of these of the frames and what constitutes the concept of the flow hive. And so they're basically putting it out for people to fund it. So on the 23rd of February, there will be a link to a Kickstarter project where people can pledge money to basically crowdfund it as a project. I mean, look, do you know what? It's difficult. I mean, Amanda Lee Riley, thank you for your point here. I can't see how the honey flow hive wouldn't attract ants as well. They'd be bound to be drips, surely. So that's what she's making a comment on there. Thank you, Amanda, for that. What have we got on here? Yes, so Amanda also then says, how are the bees going to know to refill the comb if the cappings haven't been touched? Which is begs a very good question. I just think there's an awful lot of questions which are going to come out on this. And I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I suppose I have a more sitting on the fence opinion on this, which is, Pauline, I think you're absolutely right. Bees are affected no matter what happens. If you're extracting honey from a beehive, bees are affected. And it depends on your mentality and your thought process as to why you're keeping bees in the first place. There was a very good article from the Natural Beekeeping Trust. I'll try and put a link in this later on, which basically is summarised as the culmination of callousness. Some people may say that they'd expect as much from the Natural Beekeeping Trust, but it goes on this point, which is, are we interfering? I think it is such a tricky issue. Me, I've always been one to experiment. I've always been one to try everything once or twice. I remember when I started beekeeping, and I deliberately started up using a national hive and a bee house. And partly the reason why I did it at the time was I was relatively rebellious, and everyone was telling me, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I was sort of saying, well, actually, I have no preconceptions of what is right and what is wrong in the beekeeping world. And I still feel, I suppose, I'm a little bit like that. So why not try it? And I tried the bee house for 2 years. I still use it now. And like my national hive, there were good things about it and there were bad things about it. And I think the same could be said for almost any single beehive that we're using out there, which is, you know what, people don't like change and people don't like the bee house. I have to say, do you know what, I'd rather use a national, but there are certain things that the bee house is far better than the national at. But when it comes to moving the damn thing, it's a nightmare. The point is, for me, every hive has a good and a bad side to it. This, do you know what, it could be exactly the same thing. It won't suit every beekeeper, that's for sure. But it might suit some. My personal viewpoint on this, if I'm brutally honest, having looked at all their FAQs and what they're talking about this hive, I don't think this is pitched at the beekeeper who's been keeping bees for years and years and years. I just don't think it is. I think actually rather naively, and it's the only criticism I've got at this primary point, is it's almost targeted at non-beekeepers, suggesting you can put, like I thought when I started, jokingly, you stuck a tap and you filtered out your own hive, your own honey. Personally, I think they're pitching at that marketplace. Is that right or wrong? That, for me, is the biggest issue that I have with this whole thing. It's making collecting honey an easy thing to do, and almost you don't even think about it. You just turn the tap on and it pours out your honey. I think beekeeping is more than that, personally. But do you know what? I'm absolutely willing to give a hive like this an absolute try, because credit to them. This could well be in 5 or 10 years' time, if these things are ironed out and questions are answered, like what you said there, Amanda. Like Ian Sherwood's just made a point, you know, he hasn't heard of this. It looks unlikely to me. There's a lot of people with a lot of comments on it, but let's try it. Let's see what happens.
Well, as I say, if they send me one, I'm more than happy to try it and do a report on it.
Absolutely. Let's see what happens.
I think, James...
Go for it, Peter.
I think, James, per our discussion earlier today, this could be as revolutionary as the introduction of movable frame hives. It's a completely new concept. We just don't know.
No, I don't think we do. And I'm sure when Langstroth started his, you know, hives back in the day, I'm sure there were an awful lot of people just saying, you're absolutely bonkers mad. Do you know what? There are people out there who are putting opinions on this in terms of it's the most amazing thing since sliced bread. They haven't tried it yet. There's people out there who are completely trashing it. They haven't tried it yet. The simple thing is we just don't know. My only criticism, I think they're trying to make beekeeping very, very cool, and for the non-beekeeper to just say you turn the tap on. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do.
To be fair, on the website they do keep emphasising that you need to look in the brood nest and check for diseases, swarming, etc., etc. So you know, they are saying that you've got to do, if you like, proper beekeeping, even if you've got this flow super on top. So I think you've got to give them the credit for that they do emphasise that, and that is a very important point. You can't just leave your bees and then take the honey off and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see. We'll keep you all posted in how that goes.
I thought the FAQs are very credible.
There's a lot of them. It seems as if they've only just put them up, and I think there's been a lot of demand for it. I mean, I think, Claire, you alluded to this. They've got an awful lot of high-profile beekeepers in the US and Oz, I think.
It's
almost
Australia and Canada, I think.
So we'll have to see. George Cohen, good to see you on here. Thanks so much for commenting. He wasn't aware that the beekeepers are really sort of going for the wooden hives. Certainly, I know they do over this way. It's the green peckers, right? Which go for them. Is that right?
Oh, I can never remember.
It's the ones who are on the ground, isn't it? Which are hopping.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the green ones that eat the ants.
So there you are, George. It's the green ones which attack our wooden hives. We have lots of chicken wire around ours. It's interesting they go after plastic. Not necessarily. Yeah, it's
but
polystyrene rather than plastic.
Yeah, it's only when they realise that there's actually bees in there. You know, as I said, we've had years and years with no problems at all. But once one woodpecker realises and makes the discovery, then you've got to protect everything.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are
pinning CD discs to the side of the boxes works quite well as a deterrent.
Yeah, I've also seen CD discs sort of slung on strings across gardens to keep the birds off the things as well. So yeah, I'll try the CDs. I've got plenty of old CDs. I'll go and nail them to the hives.
I tell you what, though, just looking at that photo from the polystyrene hive, it's amazing the damage they do. So it's shocking.
They do huge damage very, very quickly without you noticing.
Okay, look, we are 35 minutes into this. This is Beekeeping Question Time with Beecraft Magazine, and please, again, if you're wherever you're watching this, whether it's on the Beecraft website or on the Google Plus event page, just pop some questions in the comment box, and we'll be happy to bring them in. I'm going to bring in a question which was sent in earlier from Kyra. I hope I've mentioned your name right. And she says here, as a new beekeeper hoping to begin this year, course coming up soon, when should I try to buy a nucleus? I have read that earlier ones are better, as they are from overwintered nukes, rather than later purchases being from recent splits. Is there any truth in this, please? Many thanks if you read it out. I feel a bit like Philip Schofield with what's that little pet, the gopher, reading birthday cards out. This is bad. What are your thoughts on this? Wendy, have you got anything? Actually, I don't know if your sound's back, Wendy.
I think I've found my way back in.
There you go. What do you think about this? When should you try and buy a nucleus? What's your thoughts on that?
I would want to go for a nucleus that was a proven nucleus that has been overwintered, to be honest. That would be my view. A nucleus, you wouldn't get a nucleus this early on in the season anyway. I wouldn't have thought.
No, I wouldn't think so.
That's going to be something that's later on in the year and necessarily proven.
I think you need to check that it is actually up to what was the British standard. The British beekeepers have got a leaflet which gives you a sort of a basic constitution of a nucleus hive, and I think you've got to make sure that it conforms with that. You've got to have enough bees, you've got to have a laying queen, you've got to have brood, you've got to have food. And apart from that, I honestly don't think it matters as long as it conforms to that. I mean, if you want it early, yes, you've got to have an overwintered one. But if you're not desperate to have bees, then I don't think it matters when you get it, as long as it is a good nucleus.
And the questioner, I think she says she's just about to start her course. Is that right?
Yes,
because I would suggest she doesn't get a nucleus until she's done her course, which would suggest she's getting a later nucleus. If she gets one now, it'll be a strong one that's overwintered, and she won't have done very much in her course, and she could actually find herself in difficulties. That's
a good bit of advice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was in that in my first year, I got a very, very late nuke. In fact, I got 2 because the advice at the time was to get 2 because then you can always tell how one's doing against the other one. So as a beginner, obviously you haven't got a pure sense of if that colony is doing the right thing or not. And so the advice that I received was get 2, and then you can always measure one against the other. And that's why, funny enough, I was very pleased I got them late in the year because they still went very, very strong for me. And I hate to think what would have happened if I had 2 really strong colonies early on. So, okay, we've had another question in here from Ian Sherwood about swarm control. What's the simplest method for new beekeepers? Ian, I have to say we've got an entire hangout dedicated to swarm control coming up in a couple of months' time. So. What I might do is, because we could almost have literally an entire hour on swarm control, so I suggest we leave that until the next one. We had one come in from Simon Noblet on Facebook about how do you treat varroa in spring. He did Apigard in September, oxalic acid in December. How would you treat varroa in spring? Rodri, have you got any comments on that?
Yeah. I personally, that's the way I treat varroa. I treat with the max going into the autumn, and then oxalic acid during December when there's very little brood in the hive. How you treat them in the spring, personally, I would say it's more of a monitoring activity. Then I wouldn't actively put any chemical intervention on the hive. I would simply monitor the varroa drop. And then if it's low, you don't need any intervention. If it's a medium to high drop, then you consider activities like drone brood culling or a shuck swarm, artificial swarming, that sort of thing, just to intervene then. So I would say during the spring, monitor the varroa levels and see how it goes. I don't know what other people's thoughts are, but because I know everybody has a different opinion when it comes to varroa and varroa treatments. So it's I'll throw it open to the panel and see where it goes from there.
I have to say, it was one of my thoughts of this could be an absolute nightmare. When Wendy and I were talking about beekeepers' question time, I was thinking every beekeeper's got several different answers for several different questions. This could go terribly wrong.
I think it varies region to region as well, because I know across the country everybody uses different treatments. They've got different styles. Your mentor will show you one way, and then another beekeeper has completely different ideas. I know BeeBase has got a lot of valuable information on it, and I'll put some links up after. I'll send them through to you for up. So.
That's great, we'll do. Anybody else? Who else does varroa in what way?
Well, I would agree that changing your methods of treatment, you want to have a range of them. You don't want to stick with the same ones, and you want to try and avoid the resistance building up. So I would suggest that you use a range of treatments. I mean, I'd agree with Rodri what he was saying about the timing of when he does his treatment, but I hope he varies them. I'm sure he does.
Oh yes, yeah. When I remember, that's what I say.
Well, yeah. I mean, as you say, beebase has got some very good information.
I do pretty much the same as Rodri. You can hear me. The screen seems to keeps freezing. But last year I used Apivar in the autumn, and have done oxalic treatment in the cold winter. If I don't use the Apivar, then I would use a thymol treatment, which seems to work very well as well. But that, once again, that's in the autumn once the supers are off. I'd never give any treatment for varroa when there are any supers on. Nothing that. There are some that you can use, I think, but that's not something that I would want to do.
Do any of you use the varroa traps, as in encouraging sort of putting in a super? I use 14x12, so I put in a general national frame to catch brood at the bottom. And obviously with the larger cells, that's where the varroa love to drop into. That's how I use it, and I cut out my my drone cells. I don't know if any of you guys use that at all.
No.
No.
I would tend to use that. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
I found putting in drone comb foundation, 2 into the brood box, 1 to encourage drone and 1 to cull. Seems to work quite well.
That's certainly what I found. We had a question in from Claude on Google Plus Did you get a lot of varroa this fall? Actually, I have to say, I didn't get a massive amount. Did you guys get a big amount this year, more than normal or not?
I had quite a lot of varroa in hives where I didn't think we had much in evidence at all. We didn't see much throughout the summer, but come the winter, some of the hives had quite a big drop.
I was talking to a beekeeper who's in the Reading area this afternoon, and he said that for the first time ever, he's actually had varroa drop in some of his hives over winter. Before, he's never had any. He's had sort of one a week or something. I can't remember the exact number, but he has had actually varroa dropping during the winter.
I switched treatments as well this year during the autumns. I moved to the mite-away quick strips from AppyGuard. So I noticed quite a high drop rate after that. So whether that's a function of the change in method, who knows?
Okay, let's move on. We've got about 15 minutes here. Ian, thank you for your feedback. It's very kind of you to say such a thing. Just bring in actually, there's a question here from Jackie on the email. And if you've got any questions, just pop it in underneath the video on the website. There's a little ask a question. Feel free to ask any question you want. Jackie's put here, you were talking about polyhives. I wonder if anyone has thought of making hives from scratch. Is it too much trouble versus buying one? I'm only at a preliminary beekeeping course stage. My husband is good at making things. Oh, you're lucky. My wife sadly hasn't got a husband that's good at making things. And was asking about making one, but I wonder if it's just easier and cheaper to buy complete. Oh, I've got an opinion on this, but what do you guys think? Come on, Pauline, you're laughing. You must have an opinion on this one.
Yeah, I've got a husband who loves playing with wood, and made us a hive a few years ago. It's the heaviest hive we've got, and it doesn't quite fit together. Bees build comb where they're not supposed to, and propolis it up where it's not supposed to, and ever since we've stuck to flat pack.
I think that is one of the big things. Adrian, my husband, he always says if you can saw straight, you can make a beehive, and he's absolutely right. They're not. I actually made one when I started beekeeping, but you've got to get all the measurements right, and you've got to get it square, and you've got to get the frames either at the top for bottom bee space or etc. I think if you've got access to a large amount of scrap or second-hand timber, then yeah, make them, and you've got somebody who can make them, then make them, yeah. Because the bees don't care. As long as the inside bit measurements are right, the bees don't care about the rest of it. I've seen hives made out of bricks, and that's fine. You can't move them, of course, but you know, as long as the inside's right, the bees are perfectly happy.
Yeah, that's quite right, Claire. I was just going to say that the inside dimensions are far more important than any external dimensions.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. I hope that answers. Oh, sorry, go on, Pauline.
If you have machinery to precision cut the wood, then that's slightly better than trying to saw straight.
You can still use machinery and get it crooked. Believe me, I've done it.
Good. Well, I hope, Jackie, I hope that answered your question. I have to say, on my opinion on this, I looked into this in a very, very big way in my first year. I loved the very ethos of building your own hive. I thought it sounded wonderful. I was going to do it with my father, and we realised, having downloaded the plans and purchased the plans, just how exact you had to be. And I mean, yes, it might be the internal dimensions have to be correct, and as long as that you got that right, the bees would be happy. I looked at it and just went, there is no way I'd ever be correct on any of my right angles and dimensions and all this lot. So, you know,
that's the case, James, then for buying hive parts in the flat and making them up then, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can get, I mean, suppliers have sales at many of the beekeeping conventions, and it's an opportunity to get some at a cheaper price.
But can I just say that if you're making it up from a flat pack, you've still got to get it square, and you've got to get the sides in the right place and the runners in the right place so that the frames are in the right place. If you don't do that, you're just building trouble for yourself, whether you make it yourself or whether you put one together.
It's a fun thing, Jackie. You'll enjoy it whatever happens, especially building frames. The first year when you build frames, you think it's fantastic. I used to build frames in front of Match of the Day and loved it. in year 3, 4, 5, it's got a little less enjoyable. But actually, when you do it with your association, our association is fantastic. We have massive frame building day, so that was always good fun.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. We've got 10 more minutes because I'm going to try and get some of these sort of quick questions in here. Mike Forster has emailed us saying, "What's the best way of recovering the wax and set honey from brood frames in a hive that has died out during the winter?" Any thoughts on that? Anyone?
Quite frankly, I burn them.
I think I'd second that. I'd want to know why they died out. You've got to find the cause first before you'd even consider reusing that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would agree.
There you go, that's a nice quick one. That's why I put it in. I thought we'd be quick. Right, we've got 9 more minutes.
Actually, to be serious, brood combs, with the cocoons and everything, you get very little wax out of brood combs anyway. So it really, I personally don't think it's worth the effort, even if they've died out from a known, non-disease reason. I would still burn them and refoundation the frames, clean up the frames, scorch them, do them in washing soda or whatever, and then refoundation them.
There you go. Good bit of advice. Okay, I'm going to combine 2 questions here from Daniel and from Daniel Cheatham and Anthony Stark, both regarding moving of hives and layouts of hives. So if I start with the moving of hives, so this is Anthony, and he said, "I want to move 5 hives which are overshadowed by tall trees 70 meters to a more sunny location. What is the best way of achieving this?" This is a challenging one, because has anyone got any thoughts on exactly how he may do
What's the
this?
distance to be moved?
70 meters, so it's not your 3 kilometers, which obviously we all are aware of. What would you think?
Yeah.
We can do it too. Sorry, go on, Pauline.
Yeah, I was going to say there's 2 ways. One is you move them to a friend's apiary and 3 or 4 weeks later move them back again, so that you are moving them more than 3 miles. Or the other thing, if you're moving them around about this time of year or possibly sort of late autumn, you can move them in winter if they're not flying. And what people tend to do now is, when they've moved them, stuff grass or loosely stuff the entrance with grass or fur, anything that's sort of loose that stops the bees immediately flying out, so they sort of, if they do go out, they realise they're in a different place and reorientate.
Yeah, that was going to be my one. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think the time for moving them 70 meters is gone, unless we get a really cold spell for a number of weeks. If they're not flying for several weeks, then you can do it. But what I would do is to turn them around. I mean, this is assuming that you've got a clear space over which you're moving them. If you've got sort of lots of bits and pieces in between, then I think you've got to move them, as Pauline says, to an apiary, 2 or 3 miles away, and then bring them back again. But if you've got a clear space, if you turn them round sort of quarter of a turn every few days when they're flying, so that the entrance is facing, so you're moving them backwards, if you like, to the place they're going to be, then you can move them a few feet at a time and then let them fly, and then you can move them again, they'll find it. But if you just move it across and there's lots of stuff in between, they'll come back to where they were.
There we go. So great bits of advice. Just to mention, Paul Taylor got your question in. I'm going to actually use that as the last question. I think it's an excellent one, and it's relatively quick for all of us. So, so that second sort of the part 2 from that, which was a question from Daniel Cheatham, which was what in your experience is the best layout of a small apiary? 6 hives, seen lots in a line as a format, but doesn't this cause drifting? Have you got any advice as to how you would lay out a 6-hived apiary? What would you do? Wendy, have you got any comments on that?
Well, I would have 2 or 3 hive benches, 2 hive benches holding 3 each, or 3 holding 2 each, and have them, if you just got 2, then to have them sort of at right angles to each other so that you can come in behind them. And then I would generally angle the hives on the hive bench so that they're actually in slightly different orientation, and so that they're not parallel to each other. that means you've got easy access from behind to get to all of the hives, and that way I don't feel that I have a problem with drifting at all.
Yes, it's some sort
that's how I would do it, but it also depends on the size of the apiary.
Yeah, you want to have an irregular layout. You don't want a nice long straight line, because as you point out, Wendy, it can lead to drifting. You want some sort of irregular pattern, even having different directions that the entrants are facing.
What I would like, I mean, we tend to have ours in pairs on hive stands, but they are parallel, and they seem to work. What I would do is to make three at right angles to each other. In other words, three sides of a square, preferably with the entrances facing out. Or if they're on single hive stands, as Andrew says, put them, facing different directions. But make sure you can get round to the back if it's warm way, or the side if you're cold way.
We tend to put ours in a curve, so that they're all facing a slightly different direction, and you can go behind them.
Yep.
Yeah, our association's got them in one great big gigantic circle. I mean, massive, but there's nothing stopping you doing a semicircle, which you can then access around the back. It seems a lovely way of doing it. Okay, look, last few minutes. George Cohen on Google+, thanks George, talking about how to make it square. To make a hive body or super square, measure corner to corner diagonally both ways, then just adjust with a mallet, which I think is very good advice. I made the mistake of using a set square, trying to make it diagonal. It's just not going to work. Okay, let's have a little look. I'm going to bring in one last question here. And actually, I'm going to bring in two, because this one from Val Middleton, only because it's so specific, I think it's well worth her asking. I know, Claire, you've done some research at this, and I just want to read it out to people because I think it's quite an interesting one. At the end of August 2014, my Himalayan birch trees were swarming with my Italian bees. On the underside of the leaves was a yellow fungus-like coating, which the bees were collecting in their pollen baskets. Rubbing the leaves left a yellow coating on my fingers. It was not honeydew, and my dark bees weren't interested in it at all. I asked the knowledgeable members in our club, but no one could enlighten me. What was it? Claire, did you have any idea on this? Did you have any luck finding out what it was?
No, not really. Wendy sent this to me originally, and we forwarded it to Bridget Beattie, who writes the Bee Plant of the Month section in Beecraft every time. And Bridget said that she really didn't know what it was. I mean, the problem always with things like this is you haven't got a sample, you haven't got a photo, so it's very difficult to actually say, oh yes, that is such and such. I think it's undoubted that the bees decided that it was pollen, which is why they were collecting it, and then when they got back, I presume they stored it in the cells, and then presumably found that it wasn't very palatable. I have no idea, but it sounds like some sort of a fungus. Why the yellow bees were on it and dark bees weren't, I don't know. Maybe the dark bees had found somewhere else to go and collect whatever it was they wanted. Maybe the Italian bees were at a different stage of development from the dark bees. I can't explain that one. I can't really explain why they were doing it, but I think it's because they decided that it was pollen. I mean, bees have been known to collect sort of not wet paint, but off machinery, because they thought it was propolis. It was the same consistency, and I think it's this that attracts them to it. It's the consistency of the material. So that's the only sort of explanation, or thoughts, I think, rather than an explanation that we've come up with.
Hard one, wasn't it? It was a very particular one. I mean, I think, Val, if we do find anything else out for you, then obviously we'll let you know. We've got all your details, so we'll try and find out for you. Look, before I just bring in the last question, which I think is a fantastic one from Paul, I just want to mention that we've just had our latest March Beecraft magazine has come out, and for those of you who may want to see a sample, if you're not already subscribers, or you just want to sort of see what it's all about, in the bottom, it's in this side, I think it is, or is it there, of this Hangout, wherever you are, and in the recording especially, there's a little bit which says be part of the conversation. Don't worry, it doesn't mean you're going to come in and join us. It just means that you'll be access to a few links that we've got, and that's the Beecraft shop, a Beecraft subscription with the latest sort of, I think there's about 5 or 6 pages you can see of the latest magazine. And also there's a website if you want to bring your own opinion on that new design of a beehive. There's honeyflow.com as well. And any links that we can find, I know Pauline has sent a very good link to talking about varroa control, which we'll put in there as well. So any extra information you want is accessed if you just click that Be Part of the Conversation button. But look, I'm going to finish this up. It's the last question. It came in from Paul Taylor. I'm going to go one by one, and I'm going to put you all on the spot a little bit. It says here, apart from a smoker and a hive tool, I wonder what people's third most useful beekeeping tool is. To help you out a little bit, Paul says his favourite, or his third favourite, is a small knife, which he finds invaluable. What do you guys think? Andrew, have you got a third favourite tool or bit?
Yes, I have, and that's a wedge that when I'm breaking two boxes apart, I put the wedge in and it helps me get ready to make sure I'm going to separate without pulling up a lot of frames underneath.
There you go, nice and quickly. Claire, going left and right. Claire, what's your third favourite piece?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that a veil is included.
It must be. Assume the basics are there, I think.
I suppose one that I find very useful is a hive barrow, because our apiary is up the field, which is several hundred yards, and moving supers and things. It's much better to have a hive barrow than a wheelbarrow, because you can get more on it, and B, they don't fall off quite so easily.
There you go. Pauline, what about you? What's your third favourite? Oh, you're muted, Pauline.
I'll unmute myself. Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, a wax bucket, because I make so much stuff with the wax. Whenever I'm on the hives, I don't put any wax on the floor. I've got a bucket with me with a lid on it, so the bees don't all go in it, and just put all my bits of old wax in there.
There you go. Peter, what about you?
I find rests for when you take the frames out. I've got a couple of clips in my pocket that you can clip onto the side of the brood box, lift your frames out and put them onto that. They hang free. It's very useful.
Yes, I was going to mention that. That's one of mine as well. What about you, Rodri?
I go for a bucket full of washing soda. It's undoubted you get covered in honey and get sticky, so you can just wash your gloves as you go hive to hive.
There you go. And finally, Wendy.
Well, I like to take a bag that's got absolutely everything in it that I could possibly need, actually. Because most of my hives are a distance from parking, so I'm the one who gets to do the running to and fro if we forget anything. So one bag containing absolutely everything I think we need is that's probably a bit of a big third tool, but it's really useful.
It's a bit like on Desert Island Discs, isn't it? Where they say, and what luxury item would you like to take? And someone says, I want to take an entire shed with all my tools in it. And they say, absolutely not. You're not. You've got to be a single item.
Come on, James, what about you?
Well, no. Peter, he took mine. He stole it.
That's done. You've got to have another one then.
Okay.
I'll tell you another one from me. And that is having a husband who knows more about bees than you do and can tell you what to do if you get all mixed up with things.
See, us husbands have got some use. We can't build hives, but we might be able to know a little bit.
Oh, mine's very useful. You can build hives as well.
Do you know
always have a queen catcher in your pocket as well, James.
Yeah. That's a good one, Peter. Yeah, very good one.
Or failing that, a matchbox.
Yes.
Mm. Good call.
Make sure you got lots of dry fuel with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use cocoa shells, and
that's interesting.
They're fantastic. But trying to keep, you can't really keep a whole load in your pocket. They're all loose.
We used planer shavings, or actually dried Leylandii leaves. They work very well too.
Oh, there you are. Well, look, I'm going to say just because Peter stole mine, I'm just going to say my welly boots. Welly boots for me are fantastic. No bees get in there. I don't get stung. So look, there we go. Right, that's the end. We're over an hour, but for those of you who've been watching, thank you ever so much for joining us. And please, look, if you ever want to be a part of this panel, we've done it this week as this month, sorry, as Beekeepers Question Time. But genuinely, we've got room for 10 people on here. If you want to be a part of this conversation with us, it is not all about beecraft at all. I promise you that. Next month, We're going to have a whole mixture of topics to be discussed, and we welcome you in. If you want to be a part of that, do let me know. Just email me at james@bee-craft.com. You're more than welcome to have you involved. But from all of us here, thank you ever so much for joining us, and any questions, let us know, and always email us wherever you might be. So I don't think I've missed anything, have I? Have I forgotten anything? No, I haven't. But look, thanks everyone, and thanks for these panelists for joining us. It's always a joy and a pleasure. So have a great month, everybody. The season's not far off.
Bye, everyone.